Hey, in this video, I'm going to be talking about what caused Americans to become obese. How can we look at the food availability data provided by the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, to determine why Americans became obese? What were the dietary patterns that changed corresponding to the obesity epidemic? And I'm curious to find out, and I'm going to show what are the changes that we need to make in order to reverse the obesity epidemic or to get back to where we were before the obesity epidemic. Now, a few words about myself before I launch into this discussion. I'm a medical student and a PhD student. I'm doing a dual degree. I'm working on, in my scientific part, the PhD part, I'm working on ketogenesis and fiber, and the role of each of these in modulating the immune system and thereby contributing or not contributing or protecting against chronic diseases. And of course, for my medical degree, I'm learning how to be a doctor. So I'm going to combine the two. I'm going to be a doctor and a researcher so that my research is informed by my medical practice. It's applied to pertinent and important questions in medicine. And one of those areas that I'm interested in is the obesity epidemic. If we can solve the obesity epidemic, then we can help people across a range of different outcomes, because obesity impacts a lot of different things negatively in human health. So solving the obesity epidemic is a good thing. And one of my original goals was to learn about how we could potentially solve it and how I can make a contribution in that respect. So this presentation follows that idea that if we understand more about what caused the obesity epidemic, then we can potentially roll it back. Cool. So let's launch into the discussion and begin talking about the subject at hand. So I made this graph, this set of graphs, and it's deceptively easy and simple to look at, but it took quite a long time to do. And I originally posted these in 2017, but the world of YouTube needs to learn about this, because this series of graphs, it's not just these graphs I'm posting here, but there's a whole bunch of them, made a big splash on social media during this time. And the world of YouTube, as I said, needs to learn more about this, because I think it should make a big splash everywhere. More people should be aware. So I'm going to discuss and explain these graphs and explain what they indicate. So the graph series, this particular series, but there's many of them, is called Why Are Americans Getting Fatter? A Food Love Story, in 6 graphs. And the first figure I plotted it in Excel. I used the USDA data, the food availability data. And food availability data just indicates how much food is available to each American on average. So how many calories. And it's a really good indicator of increases or decreases in food intake, or at least changes in food behaviors on average over time in Americans. And it's better than self-report, because self-report can often be quite skewed. But food availability data is less biased in that respect. Now, food availability data leaves out waste. So changes in waste patterns can cause decreases or increases that aren't necessarily indicative of actual food intake. But nonetheless, with that caveat aside, and that should be a part of our interpretation, and it will be a part of our interpretation, that caveat aside, food availability data gives a lot of really important information. And therefore, we're going to analyze it to determine why are Americans getting fatter in a food love story in 6 graphs. And to start, we're going to talk about the calorie supply per capita versus obesity. So as we can see in this graph, and if you're listening to the podcast, you can hear what I'm talking about with respect to this graph. The calories are going up consistently, and corresponding to this, obesity is also going up. They're both going up at the same time. Cool. Okay, So for people who are interested in perhaps replicating this data, although I've offered many, many times for people to work on it and replicate this data, especially people who have wanted to criticize it, I've tried to provide that opportunity to many people, but most people have not taken it up. But if you want to be a person who takes it up, be my guest. I invite you to do so. And I'm going to give that information to allow you to do so. So it's adapted from the USDA Food Availability Data System and adjusted for waste. The obesity percentages are from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, or Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and the National Center for Health Statistics National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, or NHANES. Cool. And every graph in this series of 6 graphs is the same. Now we're going to look at the calories supplied per capita from grains and flours versus obesity in the U.S. So all grains and flours, you look at the calories supplied from grains and flours in the United States, and it goes up in about 1980 until about 1998. So over that course of 20 years, the grains and flours intake goes up. But then from about 1998, 2000, all the way up to 2016 or 2015, for which this data is available, that past 15 years, actually there's been a decline in grain intake and flour intake. Meanwhile, obesity continues trending up. This suggests that grain and flour intake is not driving the obesity pandemic. It's not solid proof. There could be some groups that are still eating more grains and flours while other groups are eating less. And those groups that are eating more are becoming more obese over time. But it indicates that something about our food environment is not promoting there's less grains and flours being provided to each average individual person as a reflection of our food environment. This is what that's what it indicates. Now, even more strikingly, and these trends are validated in 3 other data sets, so it's very consistent. Our data on this is very consistent and showing all the same things. So around the year 2000, the added sugars declined precipitously in the United States, such that the average sugar intake in 2015 is equivalent to the average sugar intake in 1985. So you got an increase from 1985 to 2000, and then a decrease back to the levels of 1985 and 2015. Now, it's continued to fall since then. The data are overwhelming in this respect. Added sugars continues to fall, and a lot of this is driven by the reduction in sugar-sweetened beverages. Everybody knows that sugar-sweetened beverages are bad, therefore they've been eating less. And yet, the obesity epidemic continues unabated despite this reduction in added sugars. Now, isn't that interesting? Quite. Let's look now at added fats. Now, we saw calories went up, right? But what's the calories coming from? It's not coming from grains and flours, and it's not coming from added sugars. Where's the calories coming from? So, as we can see, the calories seem to be coming from added fats and oils. That's interesting. Added fats and oils here includes butter, margarine, lard, beef tallow, shortening, salad and cooking oils, and other edible fats and oils, as well as added dairy fats, including half and half, creams, cream cheese, eggnog, and dairy fats. And dairy fats account for less than 3% of the total, so it's not a lot. It's very little. Okay, therefore, something's going on with our fat and oil intake that's causing the calories to go up, that's correlating with the obesity epidemic. Okay, what is that? Well, let's look again at another graph, normalized to 1970 levels of intake from about the year 1995 to 2000, starting about on that 5-year period, and then you follow the time afterward. In all subsequent years after that, our intake of dairy has remained consistent, of vegetables has gone down, of grains has gone down. Meat has slightly gone up. It's been relatively consistent. Fruit has gone down. Sugar has gone down, but guess what? Fats have increased dramatically in this period of time. So fats are the only thing that are going up. Everything else seems to be going down. That's interesting, except for meat and dairy, but those are consistent. But fats have really gone up. So what's driving this increase in fats? Well, if we look at the different fats, the trends in the grams per day per capita of different fats, we can see very clearly that starting in 1970, margarine has been falling ever since. People don't want to eat margarine anymore for good reason. Butter has been relatively consistent. Cream, relatively consistent. Shortening has fallen off, especially ever since 2005. Far fewer people are eating shortening. We're eating less shortening than ever before. But yet, ever since 1970, salad and cooking oils have been increasing dramatically. From 1970 to 2000, you get a slow increase in cooking oils and salad oils. And then from 2000 to 2015, you get a dramatic increase year by year in these salad and cooking oils. All right. Let's look at the average American increased the food intake by 452 calories per day from 1970 to 2010. Here are the sources. So added fats are about 50% of the added calories between that period. Grains are about 37%, and others account for a much smaller proportion. But what is the source of the added fats? It's soybean oil. As we can see in this figure, it's soybean oil. So let's comment on that because that's a really important point. And a lot of the seed oil people will be like, well, soybean oil is therefore causing the obesity epidemic. It's more complicated than that, and here's why. Let's imagine instead of putting soybean oil in food, we put butter in food. Would that change things? Would people eat less of that food because you have butter instead of soybean oil? And data are overwhelming. They're overwhelming. We can look at my metabolic rate video on seed oils, okay, vegetable oils and seed oils. We can look at that video and see very overwhelmingly that that butter doesn't cause less weight gain than soybean oil. In fact, soybean oil seems to have maybe a slight weight loss advantage when you compare it to added butter to food, which is very fascinating, and most people don't know that. But nonetheless, soybean oil is the constituent part in all of the additional calorie intake. So although soybean oil is probably no different than butter in terms of the satiety mechanisms, it's not going to cause people to eat more than if you just added butter instead of it. People are going to eat the same. Soybean oil is simply a cheap and inexpensive and convenient ingredient to add. And that's why food companies have done it. But it's not because the soybean oil is itself driving consumption. The calories from the soybean oil are driving consumption, and those same calories from butter would have also driven consumption in the same manner. But the calories are driving that consumption. But where is soybean oil going to be located? Well, it's going to be located in like fried foods, like fast foods, like restaurants. It's going to be located in ultra-processed foods. So all of those foods with a lot more soy oil are basically ultra-processed fast foods, junk foods, essentially. What the trend in an increase in soybean oil indicates in the food system is a trend towards ultra-processed foods, towards things like donuts, pastries, candy, etc., towards eating out as opposed to eating inside. The rise in soybean oil indicates a shift in eating behavior away from home-cooked foods and towards more industrially processed foods. Now, that's probably the reason. So industrially processed foods are calorie-dense and ultra-palatable. They are very delicious. But they are not that deliciousness and that hyperpalatability and the tendency for people to overeat them is not due to the fact that soybean oil is in them, but the extra calories from the added fat in the soybean oil is what is causing these foods to be very calorie dense. So you take a piece of bread, you dip it in soy oil, what's going to happen? It's going to become far more calorie dense because that oil is not going to take up much space, but it's going to provide a lot of calories. And so it's not going to provide much additional satiety. If anything, it's going to encourage people to eat more, but with a lot of calories as well. So that is the food love story in the United States over the past 50 years. That is the reason for the obesity epidemic, more or less. Now, there's many mechanisms and many open questions that we need to ask about this and ask about these data. But, and we will do that in this series of videos. But it's clear that these additional added fat sources to the food have been have formed the lion's share of additional calories in the food system. And not carbs, not anything else, but like soybean oil, okay? And so it's very important to understand and recognize if we want to understand what's causing the increase in obesity and how we can potentially fix it. Hope you liked the video. If you did, click subscribe at the bottom, turn on notifications, check me out at Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Kevin and Bass, KevinnBass. Also check me out at Patreon at the same, KevinnBass. Make sure to follow me on Apple Podcasts as well as Spotify, and review and rate on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Listen to me every morning for your commute. This is the best nutrition and health information on the internet. I provide the best analyses and the most cutting edge and up-to-date ideas about health and nutrition, and it would be good for anybody who's really interested in this topic to listen, because you will become quite a competent individual in talking and thinking about these issues far more than by listening to almost any other podcast on the topic. There's only like one or two other podcasts, in my opinion, that are as good. So follow me, check me out, and leave a rating or review, especially on Apple Podcasts, because that will be super helpful. And I would love if you leave a comment in the comment section. By doing so, I will be able to see what people are thinking, and then also you can give me some feedback, positive or negative, and I'll respond, because I like to receive that feedback and I like to know what people think about the content. Cool. Hope this is helpful for you. Remember, click subscribe at the bottom, turn on the notifications as well, and leave a donation if you're so inclined. It will help me to do more of this as opposed to babysitting my kids. I love my kids. I know I rag on them for every video, every time I pitch this, but like, if you want more content, they love me and we're good. If you want more content, then make that donation so that I can then continue to get them the things that they need, so that they don't drive their mother crazy all the time, and I'm able to go do some of this stuff. And buy a Bugatti. That's also a goal. So help contribute to my Bugatti, please. We're going to get like one of the best ones, and it's going to look awesome. And for these videos, I'm going to like take videos of my Bugatti before I do the videos. That's the goal. Okay. So please help me get my Bugatti. All right. Hope that was cool and helpful for you. And please check me out for the next one, because it's going to be a banger too. Just like this one. Same series. We're going to continue the same series. Like we're going to keep talking about these issues. Like what's causing these problems, what's not causing these problems, how can we change the food system, essentially. Hope you liked it. Peace.